Father's ultimatum. Alien princess defies fate and rejects. A human bridegroom. The throne room of the Velathari Empire stretched for nearly 1,000 meters, and every inch of it was filled with nobles who had come to witness history unfold before their eyes. Emperor Kelvern sat upon the crystal throne, his forearms folded across his chest as he watched the gathered crowd with ancient eyes that had seen 3 centuries of war and peace. His daughter stood beside him, and Princess Salith had never looked more beautiful or more furious. "You cannot be serious," she whispered through clenched teeth, her silver skin flickering with the bioluminescent patterns that betrayed her anger. "I have never been more serious in my entire reign." The Emperor replied without looking at her. "The Dominion grows stronger with each passing cycle, and we grow weaker. Then we fight harder. We have been fighting for 60 years, daughter, and we are losing." The great doors at the far end of the throne room opened, and silence fell over the assembly like a heavy blanket. A small delegation walked forward, and at its head was a creature that made Salith's stomach turn with disgust. A human. He was shorter than most Velathari, standing barely 2 meters tall with only 2 arms and skin the color of warm earth. His black hair was cut short, and his dark eyes swept across the room with a calm that seemed almost unnatural. "Presenting Ambassador Park Junho of the Terran Republic," the herald announced, his voice echoing through the chamber. The human stopped at the proper distance from the throne and bowed deeply, holding the position for exactly the right amount of time before rising. Salith had to admit he knew their customs well, but that only made her hate more. "Ambassador Park," the Emperor said, rising from his throne, "you honor us with your presence. The honor is mine." "Your Imperial Majesty," the human replied in flawless Velathari, "I bring greetings from the Terran Republic and our sincere hope for friendship between our peoples." "Friendship," the Emperor said. "Yes, let us speak of friendship." He descended the steps and stood before the assembly, his voice carrying to every corner of the room. "For 60 years, we have fought the Dominion alone, and for 60 years, we have watched our territory shrink and our children die. But today marks a new chapter in our history." Salith felt her hearts begin to race as her father continued. "The Terran Republic has offered us a military alliance, one that could turn the tide of this war and save our civilization from extinction." Murmurs swept through the crowd, and Salith saw hope kindle in eyes that had known only despair for decades. "In exchange," the Emperor continued, "they ask only for a symbol of our commitment to this new friendship." He turned and looked directly at his daughter. "A marriage between our peoples." The silence that followed was absolute. Salith felt the blood drain from her face as understanding crashed over her like a wave. "No," she breathed. "Princess Salith will wed Ambassador Park Junho," the Emperor announced, "and their union will seal the bond between the Velathari Empire and the Terran Republic for all time." The crowd erupted into chaos, some cheering and others crying out in shock. But Salith heard none of it. She was staring at the human, at this Park Junho, who stood with his hands clasped behind his back and his expression carefully neutral. He knew he had known all along, and he had said nothing. Something inside her snapped. "I refuse," she declared, her voice cutting through the noise like a blade. Silence fell once more. "Salith," her father warned. "No," she said again, louder this time as she descended the steps and approached the human. "I will not be sold like livestock to some primitive creature from a death world." Park Junho's expression did not change, but she saw something flicker in his eyes. "Your people crawled out of the mud barely 2,000 years ago," she continued, circling him like a predator. "You have no culture, no history, no legacy worth preserving." "Salith, enough," the Emperor commanded, but she was beyond reason now. Beyond caring about politics or alliances or the fate of her empire, you are scavengers. She spat at the human. You spread across the galaxy like vermin, taking what others have built and claiming it as your own. She stopped directly in front of him, close enough to see the tiny lines around his eyes, and the way his jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. I would rather watch my empire burn than bind myself to something so far beneath me. The throne room held its breath, and Park Junho did something that surprised everyone watching. He bowed, not a shallow bow of greeting, but a deep bow of respect, held for a long moment before he straightened and met her eyes. I understand, Your Highness, he said quietly. I apologize for any offense my presence has caused. Then he turned and walked back toward the doors, his footsteps echoing in the stunned silence. He did not look back. He did not raise his voice or defend himself. He simply left with more dignity than Salith had ever seen from anyone in her father's court. The doors closed behind him, and the Emperor's voice was like ice. You have 30 solar cycles, daughter. Salith turned to face him. In 30 cycles, you will accept this marriage, or you will be stripped of your title and exiled from this empire forever. Before she could respond, a messenger burst through the side entrance, his face pale with terror. Your Majesty, urgent news from the outer colonies. Speak. The Dominion has launched a full blockade, and 3 colony worlds are trapped without supplies or military support. The Emperor closed his eyes when he opened them again. They held a despair that made Salith's anger turn to ash in her chest. And so it begins, he whispered. May the ancestors forgive us all. Salith looked at the closed doors where the human had disappeared, and for the first time, she felt the tiniest seed of doubt take root in her heart. Father's ultimatum. Alien princess defies fate and rejects her human bridegroom. The colony world of Vera 7 burned beneath a sky choked with smoke, and ashy Lith pressed herself against the wreckage of her shuttle, listening to the distant thunder of the minion artillery as it pounded the last defensive positions into rubble. She had been foolish to come here, thought echoed in her mind as she checked her injuries, finding burns along her left arm and a deep gash across her shoulder that would need medical attention soon. She had wanted to prove that she could save her people without human help, that the alliance was unnecessary, that she was right to reject Park Junho and everything he represented instead. She had crashed behind enemy lines with no communications, no weapons, and no way to call for rescue. Brilliant strategy. Princess, she muttered to herself. A sound made her freeze, and she turned to see a group of figures emerging from the smoke. For a terrible moment, she thought they were Dominion soldiers, but then she recognized the shapes of Valathari civilians, women and children and elderly who stumbled through the destruction with nothing but the clothes on their backs, and leading them was the last person in the galaxy she expected to see, Park Junho. Human wore simple civilian clothes covered in dirt and blood, and he carried a Valathari child in his arms, while another clung to his back. His face was streaked with soot, and there was a makeshift bandage wrapped around his left thigh. But his eyes were alert and focused. This way, he called back to the refugees. The extraction point is just past this ridge. He stopped when he saw Salith, and for a moment, neither of them spoke. Your Highness, he finally said, his tone neutral. Are you injured? What are you doing here? She demanded instead of answering. Evacuating civilians, he replied simply. There is a Terran medical ship in orbit that agreed to take refugees. But why would you help them after what I said to you? He set the child down gently and pointed toward the ridge. Go with the others. Little one, I will catch up. The child ran off, and Junho turned back to Salith. Your people are dying, he said. What you said to me does not change that. But I humiliated you in front of your entire delegation. Yes, you did. I called you primitive and worthless. I remember. Then why are you here risking your life for people who hate you? Junho looked at her for a long moment, and she saw something in his eyes that she could not identify. Because they need help, he said. That is enough. An explosion nearby sent them both diving for cover, and when the dust settled, Junho was already on his feet. Can you walk? He asked. Then come with us. Unless you prefer to stay here and prove how little you need human assistance. It was not a challenge or an insult. Just a simple statement of fact. Salith gritted her teeth and followed him over the next several hours. She watched Park Junho do things that made no sense to her. He gave his food rations to hungry children and went without eating himself. Carried elderly Velathari who could not walk. Even though his own injured leg must have been screaming in pain, he spoke gently to frighten mothers and told stories to distract crying infants, and not once did he complain or ask for thanks or even mention that he was helping people who considered him inferior when they reached a destroyed building that had once been a school. They found more survivors hiding in the basement. We cannot carry everyone, one of Junho's team members said. A young human woman with short hair and tired eyes. There are too many wounded. Then we make multiple trips, Junho replied. Sir, the Dominion patrols are getting closer. I am aware. If we get caught, then we get caught, he said firmly. But we are not leaving anyone behind. The young woman nodded and went to help organize the refugee. Salith approached Junho as he knelt beside an injured Velathari elder, checking the bandages on her wounds. Your people will die for mine, she said quietly. Why? He did not look up from his work when I was a child. My grandmother told me a story about a time when humanity almost destroyed itself. The nuclear wars. You know your history, he said with mild surprise. Yes, the wars nearly ended our species. But we survived because ordinary people chose to help each other even when it cost them everything. He finished with the bandages and finally met her eyes. My grandmother was saved by a stranger who gave her the last of his food and water. And he died 3 days later, but she lived to have children and grandchildren. And one of those grandchildren is standing here today because of one act of kindness, because someone decided that a stranger's life was worth more than his own comfort. Junho said, That is not primitive, Your Highness. That is what makes us human. Before Salith could respond, shouts came from outside. Dominion soldiers. They found us. Junho's expression hardened. Get everyone moving toward the extraction point, he ordered. I will buy you time. What? Salith grabbed his arm. That is suicide. Perhaps you cannot sacrifice yourself for people who despise you. He gently removed her hand from his arm. Watch me, he said with a small smile. Then he was gone, running toward the enemy positions with nothing but a stolen Dominion rifle and impossible courage. Salith stood frozen as the sounds of gunfire erupted in the distance. Your Highness, we must go, one of the human team members urged. She looked at the refugees streaming past her, at the children and mothers and wounded who were alive because one human had decided their lives mattered, and she made a decision. No, she said. I am going after him. Your Highness, get them to safety, she commanded, picking up a weapon from a fallen soldier. I will bring back your ambassador. She ran into the smoke and fire without looking back, and for the first time in her life, Princess Salith of the Velathari Empire was not running from humanity, she was running toward it. Father's ultimatum. Alien princess defies fate and rejects. Her human bridegroom, the Dominion warship, hung in orbit like a predator waiting to strike. And somewhere inside its metal walls, Park Junho was dying. Salith knew this because she had watched them take him. She had arrived too late to save him from capture, but not too late to see the Dominion soldiers drag his unconscious body onto their transport shuttle. Now she stood in the cargo hold of a stolen enemy vessel, surrounded by a small team of Velathari soldiers who had volunteered for this mission, despite knowing they would probably never return. The human bought us time to evacuate over 300 refugees. Commander Thyrol said quietly. We owe him a debt. You owe him nothing, Salith replied. I owe him everything. The commander raised an eyebrow but said nothing more. The infiltration went better than expected, largely because the Dominion did not anticipate anyone would be foolish enough to board a warship for a single prisoner. They found the detention level after 20 minutes of careful movement. Through maintenance corridors, he should be in one of these cells. Thyrol whispered. Salith moved ahead of the group, something pulling her forward that she did not fully understand. She found him in the third cell. She checked. Park Junho hung from energy shackles mounted to the ceiling, his arms stretched above his head and his feet barely touching the floor. His shirt had been torn away, and his torso was covered in burns and cuts from Dominion interrogation tools, but his eyes were open. Your Highness, he said, his voice rough and broken. You should not be here. Neither should you, she replied as she worked to disable the shackles. Why did they not break you? They wanted to know where the refugees went, and you did not tell them. The shackles released, and Junho collapsed forward into her arms, lighter than she expected. Of course not, he whispered. They tortured you for information about people who hate you. You keep saying that. He managed a weak smile despite his injuries. But those children did not hate me. They were just scared. Salith felt something crack inside her chest, something that had been frozen for a very long time. Can you walk? I will manage. She helped him to his feet, and he leaned heavily against her as they rejoined the team. Commander, we have him, she reported. Begin extraction. They made it halfway back to the shuttle before the alarms started. Red lights flashed and sirens screamed as Dominion soldiers poured into the corridors. Move, Thyrol shouted. Laying down covering fire, they ran as fast as Junho's injuries would allow. But it was not fast enough. A Dominion squad appeared ahead of them, cutting off their escape route. Surrender the prisoners, the squad leader demanded. And we will make your deaths quick. Salith raised her weapon, knowing they were outnumbered and outgunned. Then Junho did something impossible. He pushed away from her support and stepped forward, placing himself between the Dominion soldiers and the Valathari team. Run, he said. What are you doing? Salith demanded. What I should have done from the start, he replied. Giving you a chance, he charged. The Dominion soldiers were so surprised by the suicidal attack that they hesitated for half a second. And that half second was all Thyrol needed. The commander opened fire, and suddenly the corridor erupted into chaos. Salith watched Junho fight despite his injuries, watched him take down two soldiers with nothing but his bare hands. Before a third caught him with a rifle butt to the skull, he fell. And she screamed, but he had done enough. The Dominion squad was broken, and Thyrol's team finished them in seconds. Salith ran to Junho and found him still breathing, barely conscious but alive. Stupid human, she whispered, pulling him into her arms. Why you keep trying to die for people who do not deserve it? His eyes flickered open. Everyone deserves it, he breathed. That is the point. A Dominion soldier appeared behind them, his weapon raised and aimed at Salith's back. She did not see him, but Junho did, with the last of his strength. He threw himself in front of her just as the soldier fired. The plasma bolt struck him in the chest, and he crumpled to the ground without a sound. Thyrol killed the soldier a moment later, but the damage was done. Salith dropped to her knees beside Junho, pressing her hands against the wound as purple-blue blood seeped between her fingers. Human blood was supposed to be red, but she had forgotten in that moment. Stay with me, she commanded. That is an order from your princess. Not my princess, he whispered. You made that clear. I was wrong, she said, and the words tore out of her like something physical. I was wrong about everything. His hand found hers. Then it was worth it. Do not you dare die on me. Park Junho, hate me if you want, he said, his eyes starting to close. "But I will not let anyone die if I can stop it. I do not hate you," she said. And she was crying now, silver tears streaming down her face. "I do not hate you at all," he smiled. "Just slightly. Good," he breathed. "That is good." Then his eyes closed, and his hand went limp in hers. "Your Highness, we have to go," Cyril urged. "He is dying. He will definitely die if we do not get him to a medical facility immediately." Salith gathered Junho in her arms, lifting him with strength she did not know she possessed. "Then we run," she said, and they ran. Carrying the broken body of a human who had given everything for people he had no reason to save, they ran through fire and death and chaos, and somehow, impossibly, they made it as the stolen shuttle launched from the Dominion warship. Salith sat beside Junho's unconscious form and held his hand there. Father's ultimatum was almost over, but she no longer cared about deadlines or politics, or the pride of the Velothari Empire. She only cared about the human who had shown her what true strength really meant. Father's ultimatum. Alien princess defies fate and rejects her human bridegroom. The Royal Medical Wing had never seen anything like it. Princess Salith, heir to the Crystal Throne, had not left the human's bedside in 9 days. She slept in a chair beside his bed when exhaustion overwhelmed her. She ate only when the physicians threatened to sedate her and force nutrients into her system. And she waited. Park Junho lay in a regeneration pod designed for Velothari biology, surrounded by physicians who had never treated a human before and were learning as they went. The plasma bolt had torn through his chest and damaged 3 major organs that the doctors did not even have names for by all rights. He should have died on that shuttle, but he did not die. Humans are remarkably resilient, the head physician told Salith on the 3rd day. His cells are regenerating at a rate that should be impossible for such a young species. He comes from a death world, Salith replied, remembering the insult she had thrown at him. His entire species evolved to survive the impossible. She had meant it as cruelty when she first said it. Now she understood it was something else entirely. On the 5th day, she began to research. The palace archives contained extensive records on humanity, most of them dismissive analyses written by Velothari scholars who considered humans barely worth studying. But Salith dug deeper. She found the true history, the parts that her people had chosen to ignore because they did not fit the narrative of human inferiority. She learned about the nuclear wars that nearly destroyed Earth, about cities turned to ash and billions dead in a span of hours. And then she learned what came after. Instead of falling into permanent barbarism, humanity had rebuilt. They had created international laws against the weapons that almost killed them. They had fed their hungry and healed their sick and reached for the stars with hands that had once held only fire. They could have conquered US, she whispered to Junho's unconscious form on the 7th day. When they developed faster than light travel, they had the technology to dominate every species they encountered. She pulled up the records of first contact between humans and the Velothari. Nearly 200 years ago, we were at war with 3 other species when your ships arrived, she continued. Your fleet could have destroyed us or waited for us to weaken and then taken our territory, but they had not done that. Instead, the human ambassador had offered medical aid and food supplies with no conditions attached. The Velothari had been suspicious, had assumed it was a trick, had rejected the help and told the humans to leave, and the humans had left. They had simply withdrawn and established trade relations with other species, never attacking the Velothari, never seeking revenge for the insult. Why? Salith asked the silent room. Why would you help people who treated you with contempt? Because hope is not a strategy, a weak voice replied. It is a choice. She spun around to find Junho's eyes open, his face pale but alert. You are awake, apparently. He managed a weak smile. How long? 9 days. She moved to his bedside. You almost died. I remember. You took a plasma bolt meant for me. I remember that too. Why? He was quiet for a moment. When I requested this assignment, my superiors thought I was insane. He finally said, the Volathari had rejected every diplomatic approach for 2 centuries. But you came anyway. I believed that if someone just reached out, genuinely and without conditions, eventually someone would reach back. Salith felt tears burning in her eyes. I threw your kindness in your face. Yes, I humiliated you in front of thousands of people. You did, and you still came to that colony world to save refugees. You still took a plasma bolt for me. I still believed. He interrupted gently. I still believe. In what? In the possibility that enemies can become friends, he said. In the idea that kindness is never wasted, even when it seems pointless. That is naive. Probably, he admitted. But my people were naive enough to rebuild after the nuclear wars. Naive enough to reach for the stars after we almost destroyed ourselves. Naive enough to keep offering friendship to species who rejected us. He reached out and took her hand. Sometimes being naive is the bravest thing you can do. The door burst open, and Emperor Calvern strode into the room with 3 advisors behind him. Your time is up, daughter, he announced. The deadline has passed. Salith released Junho's hand and stood to face her father. I know. Then give me your answer, the Emperor demanded. Will you accept this marriage or face exile? She looked at Junho, at the human who had suffered and nearly died for people who despised him, who had never asked for anything in return, who had simply believed that kindness was its own reward. Then she looked at her father. I was wrong about humans, she said clearly. I was wrong about everything I thought I knew. Hope flickered in the Emperor's eyes. Then you accept. No. The word fell like a stone. I will not marry. Part Junho, because you ordered me to, she continued. I will not treat him as a political tool or a symbol of alliance. Salith. But neither will I reject him out of false pride, she said. If there is to be anything between us, it will be because we choose it, not because you demanded it. The Emperor's face hardened. Then you choose exile. If that is the price of my integrity. Yes. Silence filled the room, and then Junho spoke. Your Majesty. If I may. The Emperor turned to look at him with barely concealed contempt. The human dares to address me. The human dares many things, Junho replied calmly, including asking you to reconsider. You want to defend the woman who humiliated you. I want to defend the woman who saved my life, Junho said. The woman who risked everything to pull me out of a Dominion warship when she had every reason to let me die. He struggled to sit up, and Salith moved to help him without thinking. Your daughter showed more courage in one night than most people show in a lifetime, he said. Exiling her would be the greatest mistake you could ever make. The Emperor stared at him for a long moment before he could respond. An aide rushed into the room. Your Majesty, the Dominion fleet has jumped into the system. They are launching a full invasion. The Emperor's face went pale. How many ships? Over 3,000. Salith felt her heart stop. They were all going to die. Father's ultimatum. Alien princess defies fate and rejects. Her human bridegroom, the throne world, burned Dominion warships, filled the sky like locusts. And the Velathari defense fleet was crumbling under the assault from the palace observation deck. Salith watched her empire die. We have perhaps 6 hours before they breach the planetary shields, Commander Therill reported grimly. After that, it will be a ground war we cannot win. Emperor Calvern stood at the window with his hands clasped behind his back. His face carved from stone. The Terran Republic, he said quietly. Will they come? You rejected their alliance, Salith replied. Why would they help us now? Because I asked them to. She turned to find Park Junho walking toward them, still pale from his injuries, but standing on his own feet. "What did you do?" she demanded. "I contacted my government an hour ago," he said. "I told them the Velathari people were about to be exterminated and asked if we would help. And their response. They wanted to know why they should risk human lives for a species that had rejected them." The Emperor's jaw tightened. "A fair question." "I told them the truth," Junho continued. "I told them that the Velathari are proud and stubborn and sometimes cruel. You are not helping your case." Saleth said, "I also told them that I had met Velathari who risked their lives to save me when I was just a stranger. That I had seen mothers protect their children with the same ferocity human mothers show. That I had watched ordinary people share their last food with refugees they did not know." He moved to stand beside Saleth at the window. "I told them that the Velathari are not so different from us. That they are afraid and fighting for survival just like we were once. And that refusing to help them would make us less than what we claim to be." "What did they say?" A smile crossed his face. "Look up." Saleth raised her eyes to the sky, and her breath caught in her throat light was blooming among the stars. Hundreds of flashes that meant only one thing: ships jumping into the system. "The Terran Third Fleet," Junho said quietly. 400 warships, 30,000 marines, and every medical vessel we could spare. The Dominion formation began to break apart as human ships tore into their flanks. "They came," Saleth whispered. "We always come," Junho replied. "When people need help, we come." The battle raged for our Saleth. Watched from the observation deck as human and Velathari ships fought, side by side against the Dominion horde. She saw human cruisers throw themselves in front of Velathari transports to shield them from incoming fire. She saw human Marines drop onto colony stations that the Velathari had already given up for lost, fighting to save civilians they had never met. She saw sacrifice after sacrifice, humans dying for a species that had mocked them, that had called them primitive and worthless, that had rejected their friendship again and again. "Why?" she asked Junho. "Why do your people keep giving everything for others?" "Because someone has to be first," he said. "Someone has to reach out even when they expect to be rejected. Someone has to show kindness even when it will not be returned." "That sounds like a good way to be destroyed." "Maybe," he admitted. "But it is also the only way to build something worth having." By dawn, the Dominion fleet was in full retreat. The throne world was saved, and the Velathari Empire would survive. Emperor Calvern stood before the assembled court, and for the first time in decades, there was something other than despair in his eyes. "We owe the humans a debt we can never repay," he announced. "They came to our aid when they had every reason to abandon us to our fate." He looked at Junho. "Ambassador Park, on behalf of the Velathari Empire, I offer you our deepest gratitude and our sincerest apologies." Junho bowed. "No apology is necessary, Your Majesty." "It is," the Emperor said firmly. "We were wrong about your people." "I was wrong." He turned to face his daughter. "And I was wrong about something else as well." Saleth straightened. "You taught me that there are some things more important than politics," the Emperor continued. "Integrity, courage, the willingness to stand alone for what you believe." "Father, your exile is revoked," he said. "Not because of the alliance, but because you showed me what true leadership looks like." Saleth felt tears streaming down her face. The Emperor nodded once, then turned and walked away, leaving her alone with Junho. "So," Junho said quietly, "what happens now?" Saleth looked at him. At this human who had endured her cruelty and saved her life and changed everything she believed. "I spent my whole life thinking I knew what humans were," she said. "Primitive, inferior, unworthy of respect. And now I know I was wrong about everything." She reached out and took his hand. "I rejected you because I was afraid," she admitted. "Afraid of being bound to someone I considered beneath me." afraid of what it would mean for my future, afraid of change. And now I'm only afraid of one thing. What is that? Losing the chance to know you, she said. Really know you, not as a political arrangement, but as a person. Junho smiled, and it was the most genuine expression she had ever seen on his face. I would like that, he said. It will not be easy, she warned. My people are proud and stubborn, and changing their minds about humans will take generations. Fortunately, I am very patient, and I am still learning how to be kind. That is all anyone can ask. She stepped closer to him. I do not know if I can love you, she said honestly. I do not know if what we have can ever become what a marriage is supposed to be. Neither do I. But I want to try, she said. Not because my father ordered it. Not because of alliances or politics or duty. Then why? Because you showed me that enemies can become friends, she said. And I want to believe that is true. Junho raised her hand to his lips and kissed it gently. That is enough, he said. That is more than enough. Outside, the sun rose over the throne world. And for the first time in 60 years, the Valathari people looked to the future with hope. They had rejected a bridegroom. They had found something far more precious. They had found an ally, a friend, and perhaps someday something more. And it had all began with a single human who refused to stop believing that kindness was never wasted, even when it seemed impossible, even when it hurt, even when the whole galaxy told him he was wrong. Park. Junho had reached out his hand, and finally, someone had reached back.